In this video, I will show you how a project progresses through one single iteration and how all 6 core processes are included. We will use RMO's trade show system as our example. So we will look at the first iteration. The SDLC, or the System Development Lifecycle, is a general description of how to build and manage a system. The steps of an SDLC are carried out as a project, and a project is a planned undertaking that has a definite start or a beginning and a defined ending, and it produces a specific outcome or a result. Now, an overall project will develop an entire system. However, each iteration is considered as a mini project. It starts, it ends, and it produces something. As you can see on this slide, this is a graphical representation of an overall SDLC project. This is just a general aspect to show you how a project might proceed. Notice that the overall project is divided into iterations or mini projects, and each iteration usually involves all 6 core processes, as you can see on the left side of the graph. And each iteration produces some results. One thing you should know in this example is that each core process has several activities. In other words, to carry out a core process requires several steps. We will identify them specifically in this overview. We will learn more about each individual activity later in this course, but each core process has internal activities. The RMO trade show system. Let's talk about the project. What is the need or my problem statement? Our purchasing agents attend trade shows, and while these agents are at the trade show, they would like to capture information about the product or product information, and also capture information about the suppliers that supplies those products. They want to do that while these agents or purchasing agents are at the trade show. So we have identified 2 subsystems for this trade show system. The first one is called the supplier information subsystem, and the second one is called the products information subsystem. So let's go through the core processes. Core process 1. Remember, each core process has also several activities that needs to be carried out to the project. With core process 1 usually starts before the official project is approved. Preliminary information is necessary to know if the new system is even justified. First, we identify the problem and document it with a system vision document. I'm going to show you this document or an example of this document on the next slide. Second, we obtain approval and get funding for the project. Here's an example of the system vision document for the trade show system. It usually includes a short description of the need or the problem, a preliminary list of what the system needs to do, in other words, its capabilities, and also a preliminary list of what the anticipated benefits would be for the new system. Once the project is approved, then we can start the actual project. These are the activities of core process 2, plan the project. So remember, with the first 2 projects, or I'm sorry, the first 2 core processes, it's mainly around planning and organizing the project. Now, in this core process or core process 2, we determine how big the project is, what are the major subsystems, and then we estimate how many iterations would be required. What is the output of each iteration? We also find team members and make preliminary assignments. In other words, we get the project organized. One way to do this is with a process called WBS, or work breakdown structure. And here's the example of the work breakdown structure for the trade show system. It helps to identify all the work that is required for this project. those are the activities for core process 2, which is the project planning. Core process 3. Here we start with the analysis phase of the project. In this core process, you document two types of information. One is called the use cases, and use cases are used to document the functions of the new system, how it works, and what it does. The second information is called is the list of object classes, and that will document the data and the information that the system will need to maintain and store. In our supplier information subsystem, as you can see on the slide, we have identified 4 different use cases. I want to use the system to be able to look up suppliers. So lookup supplier will become a use case. Again, we're going to talk more about use cases in future videos. I also want to be able to use the system to enter or update supplier information. So enter or update supplier information becomes another use case. I want to be able to use the system to look up contact information. So look up contact information becomes also a third use case for my subsystem, and the same applies for the fourth one, enter or update contact information. An activity diagram, which we're going to explore in more details as well in future videos, can be used to look inside a particular use case to understand the flow of work. So every use case that you define for the system will also need to be described in more details as well using an activity diagram. And as you can see on the slide in here, this is an example of how to document a particular use case. In this situation, we are documenting a workflow that goes inside the lookup supplier use case. Object classes, on the other hand, captures information about the data. So what exactly do we need to store? What exactly do we need the system maintain information about? Document the data that will be maintained by the new system. This is an example here. We have identified 4 classes or 4 object classes. So we're going to need to create a table for supplier because we need to store information about suppliers. We also need to create a table or an object or a class, you name it, about contact. So we need to save and maintain information for all the contacts in our system. The same applies for the product as well as the product picture. Core process 4, this is where the design activity starts. There are several things that must be designed. One, we must design the database, the schema, the tables for the new system. Second, we must design the high-level structure of the system. Basically, we're talking about the architectural design of the system. Third, we design the GUI or the user interface of the system or the screens. And then we finally design the actual application software or the programs themselves. On this slide, here's an example of 2 database tables and their attributes or columns. So on the left side is a table name, so we need to maintain information about the suppliers, and hence we're creating a table for supplier. The same for contact. On the right side of this graph are the different characteristics that we're going to use to describe, or the attributes or the columns that we're going to use to describe each supplier. And the same applies for the contact. Again, we'll talk in more details about all these tables as well as attributes in future videos. Core process 5. In this core process, we build, test, and integrate. This is where we do the actual programming. We also integrate the work done into a growing system. Remember, this is an iterative process, and in iterative development, we gradually grow the new system. And of course, we test it and we put new components in to see that all these components can actually work together. Core process 6, test the system to make sure that all runs properly and correctly. Then we get the users involved so that they verify that the new system does solve the business problem and it does everything that it's supposed to do. We call this as a user acceptance testing. And in some iterations, we deploy part of the system. In this case, we are deploying the supplier subsystem. In this video, we have illustrated one complete iteration of an overall project. Notice that we did include all 6 core processes into this first iteration. In our example, we even deployed the supplier subsystem. This project might only include 2 iterations, but most projects will require more.